Hi guys. Tonight we step into the bitter chill of the Rocky Mountains, where breath turns to silver mist, and the silence feels older than time itself. You stand at the edge of a frozen stream, boots sinking into snow so deep it could swallow your legs. The wind hums through the pines like a warning, brushing against your cheek with the sharp sting of a blade. You probably will not survive this winter, at least not without learning what the old mountain men already knew, that nature does not care if you live or die. It simply continues. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you are listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights and let us begin. The first thing you feel is the cold that does not stop at your skin. It creeps into your lungs, turns your breath shallow, and stiffens your fingers until the rifle in your hand feels like part of the ice itself. The mountains stretch endlessly before you, their peaks buried in clouds. There is no road here, no map that truly matters. Every ridge hides another ridge, and each shadow could mean danger or salvation. You trudge through the snow, the crunch beneath your boots echoing faintly through the stillness. Behind you, your tracks already begin to blur in the wind. It feels as though the world is trying to erase your presence, and maybe that is what the mountains want to remind you, that this land belongs to no man. Historians still argue whether the first trappers who ventured here in the early 1800s came for fortune or freedom. Some claim they sought wealth in the furs of beaver and fox, selling them for silk hats in distant cities. Others say they fled civilization itself, chasing silence and solitude instead of gold. But whatever drew them west, once the snow came, ideals froze faster than fingers. You move toward a grove of spruce, the air thick with the scent of resin and frost. The trees creak and moan under their icy burden. Somewhere a distant crack echoes like a gunshot, just a limb breaking beneath the weight of winter, but enough to send your pulse racing. Every sound feels magnified here, like the mountains are listening too. A mainstream fact floats through your thoughts. During the harshest winters, temperatures in the high Rockies could drop below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, even during daylight. Campfires struggled to stay lit, and men wrapped themselves in layers of animal hide just to see the dawn. They called this season the White Silence, because it swallowed everything: voices, hope, even time. You imagine the first snowstorm of the year. The flakes start gently, floating down like feathers. But within hours the wind howls, bending trees and filling every crack in your clothing with ice. You huddle beside your fire, guarding its flicker like your heartbeat. The flames hiss and leap, painting orange halos on the snow. Sparks rise and vanish into the blackness above, a reminder that everything here burns out quickly. Your breath fogs the air in ghostly plumes. You pull your coat tighter, fur brushing against your neck. The smell of smoke clings to you, a comforting, almost human scent, in a world where everything else smells of pine and frozen stone. The hunger creeps in next, slow and steady. You think of food stored miles away, unreachable now. Your belly growls, and the sound seems too loud, as if it might draw attention. A quirky fact slips into your mind. Some mountain men reportedly lined their boots with dried moss, believing it kept the cold from crawling into their bones. Others claim to chew pine needles for a hint of vitamin C to fight scurvy. Strange solutions, but when the nearest doctor was 1,000 miles away, superstition and survival became the same thing. You look up at the sky, an endless stretch of grey. The sun hides like a shy child, refusing to show its face. The stillness feels alive, heavy with meaning. Your fingers ache, but you keep moving, one careful step at a time. You pass the bones of a fallen tree, its trunk split by lightning long ago, charred wood against the snow-black scars in a white world. It reminds you that fire and frost are not opposites here. They are partners, both ready to consume whatever dares to linger. You wonder if the men before you felt this same mix of awe and fear, this sense that the mountain itself was watching. The air grows thinner as you climb. Each breath burns. The sound of your own heartbeat becomes louder than the wind. You pause at a ridge and look down at the valley below, a sea of white, unbroken, except for the faint trail of a frozen river. You imagine crossing it later, when the ice has thickened, though you know it could crack at any step. Out here, death is not a sudden thing. It is a slow negotiation. The sky darkens early, as it always does in winter. The stars begin to appear, sharp and cold, like shards of glass. You remember the stories of trappers who learned to navigate by them, counting constellations while waiting for morning. Historians still discuss how accurate those tales were, but it hardly matters now. When you are this far from everything, even myths become maps. Your body trembles as the temperature drops. You think of shelter, of warmth, of the promise of a fire waiting somewhere ahead. You picture the flicker of light against a cabin wall, smoke curling upward, and the faint crackle of logs splitting in the heat. You imagine what it would feel like to take off your boots, to feel blood rush back into your toes, to thaw the ache from your hands. The night settles around you like a heavy blanket, muffling the world. Somewhere nearby, a wolf howls a long, lonely sound that echoes across the valley. You stop walking and listen. It is not a threat, not yet, just a reminder that you are not alone. The mountain holds many lives, all trying to survive the same bitter night. You whisper to yourself, half as prayer, half as defiance. The words vanish into the cold. Above you, the stars pulse faintly, indifferent and eternal. Tomorrow, you will build a fire again. You will gather wood, maybe find food, maybe not. But tonight all you can do is breathe and wait, feeling the mountain's silence pressing against your chest. The first light of dawn does not arrive with warmth. It comes as a pale smear behind the peaks, a thin promise that the sun still exists somewhere beyond the clouds. You wake stiff and half frozen, wrapped in furs that feel heavier than sleep itself. Your joints ache, your breath hangs in the air, curling upward until it fades. The world is white, endless, and terribly quiet. You rise, every movement deliberate. Around you lies the wreckage of the storm's temper. Branches scattered, drifts piled high, snow packed against the side of your crude lean-to. It is not much of a home yet, just a frame of poles and pine boughs tied together with strips of rawhide. But it is what you have, and out here, what you have is everything. Historians still debate whether most trappers built cabins immediately or waited until deep winter forced them to settle. Some accounts describe men surviving weeks under little more than canvas and determination before gathering the tools to raise proper walls. You, standing here with numb hands and a dull axe, decide not to wait. The first swing bites into the frozen wood, sending a shock through your arms. The sound of the axe is the only thing alive in this silence. Each strike echoes through the trees, measured and heavy. Chips of frost-coated bark scatter into the snow. You work until sweat gathers on your back, freezing almost as soon as it forms. It takes hours to fell enough trees for a cabin. The logs roll roughly when you drag them, leaving gouges in the snow. You build the walls low at first, stacking the trunks so that the wind will pass over instead of through. There is a rhythm to it, a pulse of work and breath that begins to warm you from within. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind as you work. By the 1830s, experienced mountain men often built their cabins in valleys near running water, both for easy access and for trade routes that connected to forts like Laramie or Bent's Fort. Water meant life, even when it froze. It also meant danger, since floods in early spring could sweep entire shelters away. You pause to sharpen your axe with a small whetstone, the metallic scrape cutting through the wind. The smell of sap sticks to your gloves. You glance toward the river below, already a band of silver ice glinting between dark trees. Inside your half-finished walls, you begin to imagine warmth. You picture the fire pit in the center, the smoke rising through a hole in the roof, the fur pelts hanging like trophies of endurance. The logs groan softly as you fit them tighter, sealing cracks with mud mixed from thawed earth and pine needles. It is crude mortar, but it will do. Then comes the roof. You lash together rafters of spruce and cover them with layers of bark and hide. The air smells of resin and animal oil, sharp and earthy. You stop for a moment, watching the wind ruffle the treetops above, thinking how fragile this structure would look to anyone else. To you, it feels like a fortress. A quirky tidbit floats to mind from some half-remembered journal. One trapper supposedly carved prayers into the doorframe of every cabin he built, believing the wood would remember and keep him safe. You trace your finger along the fresh grain, considering it. Maybe you will carve something too, though you doubt the mountain listens. Still, superstition costs nothing but time. You hear the faint crack of ice somewhere nearby and instinctively reach for your rifle. Out here, sound carries strangely. It could be a deer shifting its weight or a bear waking in confusion. You wait, every muscle tense, until the silence returns. You return to your task, driving pegs through the corners of the structure, sealing each joint with care. The sky begins to darken again, not with storm this time, but with dusk. In the dim light, your work takes on a strange glow, the logs black against the snow, the cabin crouched low like a beast waiting for night. Historians still argue whether these early shelters counted as homes or simply survival stations. Some letters from the period describe them as dens or holes against death, which feels more honest. Yet in that rough space, with walls close enough to touch from any corner, men dreamed, prayed, cursed, and lived another day. You light a small fire just outside, feeding it slowly, coaxing the flames like a child learning to breathe. The wood hisses as moisture burns away. You hold your hands over it until you feel the first real warmth of the day. It is almost shocking. The fire's light paints your new home in gold and shadow. You drag a pelt inside, spreading it across the packed earth floor. The smell of smoke and hide fills the air, and for a fleeting moment you imagine comfort. Tomorrow, you will line the walls with fur, hang your traps by the door, and maybe even carve a small shelf for your few possessions. But tonight, you simply sit and listen to the wind testing your handiwork. You think about the men who tried to live here before you. Some vanished into the snow, leaving nothing but rumors. Others returned east with stories no one believed. The mountains swallow history as easily as they swallow men. You are part of both now, another soul wrapped in fur and frost, daring to call this wilderness home. The night deepens. The stars return, scattered across the black sky. The fire's glow flickers against the walls, and the sound of the wind becomes almost gentle. You close your eyes, exhausted but alert, feeling the pulse of the mountain through the logs you laid with your own hands. This is where survival begins. Not with courage, but with structure, with something that stands between you and the cold. Tomorrow, the hunt for food will start again. Tomorrow, you will test the traps, check the river, and maybe see smoke from another man's fire far off in the valley. But for now, you breathe in the scent of sap and smoke, and for the first time in weeks, you feel something close to peace. The snow outside your cabin deepens overnight, settling into drifts that climb almost to the windowsill. When you step out at dawn, the air bites like sharpened glass. Each breath scrapes the back of your throat, leaving a faint ache. You move slowly, careful not to waste warmth or motion. This is the rhythm of winter now. Measure everything, even the way you breathe. You tighten the belt around your coat, brush the frost from your beard, and sling your rifle across your shoulder. The hunt is not about glory or sport, it is about survival, plain and cold. Fur will keep you alive through more ways than one. You need it for warmth, yes, but also for trade. Without it, there is no salt, no powder, no tools. Out here, the currency is measured in pelts, not coins. Records from the early fur trade show that beaver pelts once fetched nearly their weight in silver in distant markets. In London and Paris, Gentlemen and ladies wore the soft, glossy felt made from the undercoat of these animals, never knowing that each elegant hat had begun its journey in a frozen mountain stream. You think about that sometimes, the strange chain that ties you, a half-starved trapper, to someone sipping tea in a room lined with velvet curtains. You reach the edge of a frozen creek and kneel. The ice is thick, pale blue under a thin skin of snow. You tap it gently with the butt of your rifle, then clear a hole with the point of your knife. The water beneath is black and sluggish. Here is where you set your traps, heavy steel jaws on a wooden stake, baited with castoreum scraped from another beaver. The smell is musky and sharp, almost chemical. One curious account from a trapper's diary describes men chewing on pine resin and tobacco to mask their scent from animals. You try not to imagine the taste. Survival has no regard for refinement. The sun climbs a little higher, throwing a weak light across the valley. The snow glitters, and you think how deceptive beauty can be here. You check the traps you set yesterday, brushing snow away from each one. The first is empty, the second too. At the third, you find successor beaver caught cleanly, already frozen stiff. You mutter a quiet apology as you free it. You will skin it later, thawed by firelight. Researchers remain divided on how many trappers truly lived through entire winters alone. Some argue that most worked in small bands, trading labor and company. Others insist that solitude was part of the calling, that men sought these wilds precisely because no one else dared. Either way, you feel the weight of silence pressing closer every day. You sling the catch over your shoulder and begin the long walk back toward the cabin. The snow crunches beneath your boots in perfect rhythm with your heartbeat. Around you, the world seems held in suspension, waiting. A raven circles overhead, black against the white expanse, croaking like it knows something you do not. By midday, you reach a small rise overlooking the valley. You pause to rest and scan the horizon. In the distance, a faint curl of smoke drifts upward. Someone else is out there, a trapper, perhaps, or a small hunting party from a fort. You think about walking toward it but decide against it. Out here, meeting strangers can be as dangerous as facing wolves. You adjust your pack and start back down. The slope steep and slick. Your foot slips once, sending a spray of snow cascading down the hill. You catch yourself with the rifle butt and laugh quietly, the sound echoing against the trees. Even laughter feels rare these days, almost foreign. When you reach your cabin, you set to work. The beaver goes on the sled outside to thaw. You kneel by the fire, rubbing your hands, and begin to clean your tools. The smell of pine smoke fills the room. Each motion becomes ritual. Scrape, sharpen, oil, repeat. You find calm in the routine. In the corner, strips of fur already hang drying from a line. They sway gently when the door opens, whispering like ghosts. Some say that the early trappers could tell the quality of a pelt by touch alone, running their fingers through the fur with a reverence usually reserved for holy relics. Maybe that is true. Out here, fur is faith. It is the difference between freezing and seeing another sunrise. Night creeps up early again, swallowing the last light. You sit near the fire, staring into the flames. The warmth paints the walls in soft gold. You eat a small meal of dried meat and beans, the taste blunt but filling. The crackle of burning logs becomes a kind of music, steady and familiar. You think of the trading posts scattered far away at the edges of the frontier. There, men like you bring their bundles of hides, barter them for bullets, coffee, or rum. Sometimes they trade stories instead, long and winding tales of snowstorms, bear attacks, and close calls. Many of those stories are exaggerations, but in a land like this, exaggeration is just another form of truth. You roll another log into the fire and stretch out on your bed of furs. The smell of smoke and leather clings to everything. The walls creak as the wind rises outside, testing every joint and seam you built. But the cabin holds. You close your eyes and let the sound of the fire lull you towards sleep. Before you drift off, you think about what these furs will mean come spring food, tools, maybe even passage to another valley. But for now, they are warmth, the soft armor between you and the endless cold. Outside, the wind howls across the drifts, but in here, wrapped in smoke and fur, you have bought yourself one more night. Morning breaks in silence, the kind that feels too deep to disturb. The air is heavy with cold, still and sharp enough to sting your lungs. You wake slowly, surrounded by the smell of smoke and fur, the faint crackle of embers still alive in the hearth. Your fingers ache as you reach for your coat. Each movement feels deliberate, cautious, like the world itself might shatter if you rush. You step outside into a pale blue light. The snow sparkles under the rising sun, but beauty here is a cruel trick. It hides the danger that lies in every breath of air. You pull your collar higher, remembering how quickly exposed skin can burn from cold. The mountain wind has teeth, and you have learned to respect every bite. Today is not for hunting or trapping. Today is for preparing what will keep you alive through the deepest part of winter, your clothing. Layer by layer, stitch by stitch, survival is sewn together with patience and rough hands. From a pile near the door, you drag the dried hides you stretched last week. The smell of tanning solution still clings to them, bitter and earthy. You begin scraping the inner side of the skin, smoothing it until it feels soft and pliable. Each stroke of the knife sends up a faint rasping sound, steady and soothing. The cabin's walls echo with it, the rhythm of a craftsman at work. Diaries from early trappers mention that clothing was both art and necessity. Many men learned from indigenous teachers, Shoshone, Crow, and Blackfoot women who understood better than anyone how to turn hide into warmth. They taught which furs breathed and which trapped heat, which threads to use, and how to stitch seams tight enough to hold against freezing wind. Without that knowledge, most newcomers never saw another spring. You spread out a length of thick buffalo hide. It is rough, dense, nearly unbreakable. It will become your outer coat, the armor against blizzards and icy gusts. You work by firelight, cutting the hide into shape with a bone-handled knife, folding it carefully around a liner made of rabbit fur. The fur side faces inward, soft against the skin. A journal kept by an old mountain man recounts how he lined his mittens with rabbit fur and his hat with foxtails to trap warmth around the ears. He claimed no frostbite ever touched him again. You smile faintly at the thought, though your fingers are already numb. You pause for a moment and flex your hands before stitching. Your needle is a bent fish hook, your thread thin strips of sinew. Every pull of the needle squeaks faintly against the hide. You fall into a rhythm. Pierce, pull, tie, repeat. The smell of smoke mixes with leather, filling the room with a scent that feels both ancient and familiar. Outside, the wind begins to pick up, a low moan winding through the trees. The sound feels almost human, like a voice calling from far away. You glance toward the small window, frost crystals spreading across the glass in delicate white veins. For a second, the cabin seems to breathe along with you. Experts still question how some mountain men managed to survive temperatures that dipped below -40. Some say it was sheer stubbornness. Others credit clothing so layered and heavy that men could barely move. Whatever the reason, those who endured did so wrapped in fur and resolve. You drape the finished coat across your shoulders and test its weight. It feels like wearing a bear's hide, thick and reassuring. The warmth begins to seep into you slowly, like the first sip of whiskey after days in the cold. You laugh quietly, shaking your head. For all the hardship, there is something satisfying about mastering the details of survival. As afternoon wanes, you turn your attention to your boots. The leather has cracked at the seams, and one sole has started to peel. You soften the hide over the fire and patch it with new layers. Then you pack the insides with dried moss for insulation, pressing it down tight. Some trappers swore that moss kept their feet warm even in the worst snow. Whether truth or wishful thinking, you will take every bit of luck you can find. The sun slips behind the peaks early, leaving the world tinted in blue shadow. Inside, your cabin glows like a lantern, the fire casting rippling light across the walls. You hang the new coat near the door, admiring the sturdy seams. You run your hands along the stitching and think of the people who once taught this craft, their hands just as cold and steady as yours. You make yourself a small meal of cornmeal mush and coffee boiled to bitterness. The first sip burns your tongue, but you do not mind. As you eat, you imagine what it must have been like for those who first wandered into these mountains, wearing the thin coats of the cities they left behind. Most did not last long. Those who did became something else entirely part of the wild itself. The fire pops, sending up sparks that wink out before they touch the ceiling. You lean back on your bed of pelts, pulling the buffalo robe over your legs. The warmth seeps in quickly, numbing the ache in your feet. Before you sleep, your thoughts drift to the way survival changes a man. You came here for freedom, maybe even adventure. But now you understand that freedom costs comfort, and comfort costs vigilance. Every stitch in your clothing, every line in your hands, every scar on your skin tells the same story. You belong to the cold now, but the cold has not claimed you yet. Outside, the wind continues its lonely song. The trees sway, the snow whispers against the walls, and inside your small cabin, you sleep wrapped in layers of fur and faith. The morning arrives, grey and heavy. The sky looks close enough to touch, swollen with snow. You step outside, boot crunching through the crusted drifts, and your breath curls upward in small clouds. The world smells faintly of pine and smoke. Every sound feels dampened, as if the cold itself absorbs noise. It is quiet, too quiet, and you feel that familiar mix of awe and unease that the wilderness inspires. Today, your only task is to keep fire alive. In these mountains, warmth is not a comfort. It is a full-time occupation. Without it, your muscles stiffen, your mind dulls, and sleep becomes something dangerous. You kneel beside your pit, brush away the snow that crept in overnight, and check the embers beneath the ash. A faint red glow answers. You smile. There is an old saying among trappers that a man is only as alive as his fire. Letters written by fur traders in the early 19th century describe how one spark meant the difference between another sunrise or a slow, frozen death. Even seasoned men feared the long nights when damp wood refused to burn. You gather what kindling remains: a few pine twigs, a strip of bark, a shred of cloth dipped in bear grease. The grease smells sharp and wild, but it catches easily. You strike flint against steel. Once, twice, again. Sparks leap out, hiss, and fade. You strike once more, and finally a spark bites into the cloth. You bend low, blowing gently until the ember grows. A faint crackle rewards your patience. The flame begins as a whisper, then grows into a steady murmur. You feed it slowly, one twig at a time, coaxing it like a skittish animal. When the first log catches, the glow reflects against your hands, painting them gold and orange. The warmth spreads, crawling up your arms like life returning. Accounts from that time suggest that some mountain men carried their embers between camps inside hollowed buffalo horns lined with moss. It was said to keep a spark alive for days. You think about trying that one day, though you suspect it takes more skill than luck. The wind sighs through the trees, scattering snow from the branches. You glance toward the forest edge, where the shapes of pines blur into the mist. For a brief moment, you think you see movement, perhaps a deer, perhaps nothing. It is hard to trust your eyes when everything shimmers in white light. Inside the cabin, the smoke rises in a thin column through the hole in the roof. You feed the fire with a few thicker logs, feeling satisfaction settle deep in your chest. For now, the cabin is warm, but you know how quickly that can change. Researchers note that wood gathered from green trees burns poorly, choking the fire with steam and smoke. The old trappers learned to stack their wood early, seasoning it for months before the snow came. You have no such luxury, so you make do with what the storm leaves behind: fallen branches, scraps of bark, sometimes bits of furniture from men less fortunate than you. You take your rifle and step outside again to gather more. The snow squeaks under your weight. Each branch you break sends a small puff of frost into the air. The cold has a sound all its own, a kind of brittle hum that vibrates in your bones. You gather what you can, tie it in a bundle with a strip of rawhide, and haul it back to the cabin. Inside, the fire burns brighter. You sit near it, rubbing your hands, letting the heat soak through your gloves. The smell of pine resin fills the air. You think about how many times men must have sat like this, in this same valley perhaps, whispering thanks to no one in particular for a living flame. A story from an old trapper's tale tells of one man who lost his fire during a blizzard and survived by wrapping himself in a still warm bison hide until dawn. He woke nearly frozen but alive. You cannot help but imagine that moment, the darkness pressing close, the heart beating slow, the first faint glow of morning. There is a strange comfort in knowing that even desperation can be ingenious. You add another log to the fire and listen to it hiss and pop. The sound is hypnotic, almost musical. You find yourself staring into the flames, watching the shapes twist and flicker. Each spark rises like a tiny promise that the night will pass. By late afternoon, snow begins to fall again, soft at first, then heavier. You close the shutters and tighten the door latch. Inside, the warmth builds. The walls creak, expanding slightly with the heat. You cook a simple stew, the smell filling every corner of the cabin. It tastes of salt, smoke, and gratitude. When the storm finally hits, it hits hard. Wind howls through the cracks, trying to steal your warmth. The fire becomes your anchor, the single pulse of life in a world gone white. You sit beside it for hours, feeding it, guarding it. The flames reflect in your eyes, steady and stubborn. You think about the men who carried fire through storms that lasted for days, how their hands must have blistered, how their minds must have wandered toward home. No one truly owns fire out here. It only agrees to stay a while. The storm passes by midnight, leaving a muffled calm behind. You step outside once more, the snow knee-deep now, the moon hidden behind clouds. Your cabin glows faintly from within, a soft beacon in the frozen dark. You realize then that survival is not just a matter of strength but of devotion. Keeping a fire alive, like keeping your spirit awake, requires constant attention. One careless moment, one forgotten ember, and all that warmth disappears into smoke and silence. You return inside, seal the door, and lie near the hearth. The wood crackles softly, sending out one last wave of heat before settling into coals. As you drift towards sleep, you whisper a small thank you to the flame itself, knowing it has no ears but deserves the words all the same. The wind has calmed, leaving a hush so deep that your heartbeat feels too loud. You step out into the soft glow of a pale morning. Frost paints the branches in glimmering white, and every surface sparkles as if the world were made of powdered glass. Winter, in its strangest way, looks gentle right before it turns cruel again. Today is about food, or rather, about what remains of it. The supplies you brought have dwindled. Salted meat is nearly gone, flour down to its last pouch. You know what this means. The final hunt before the true heart of winter. The thought fills you with a dull mix of dread and duty. You shoulder your rifle, check your knife, and sling your pack across your back. The air is still. Even the ravens seem to be conserving their energy. You move carefully through the trees, your breath clouding the silence. Journals from early fur trappers describe the late autumn hunts as both bounty and farewell. Elk, deer, and bison moved in herds before the snow closed the passes. Those who stocked enough meat could ride out the cold. Those who failed were often found when the thaw came, bones gnawed clean by wolves. You follow the tracks of a small herd hoof prints frozen into the crusted snow. Each print tells you more than a book ever could. The weight, the direction, the time of passing. You crouch and touch the edge of one, feeling the ice rim it has formed overnight. The animal is close. The forest is quiet in that particular way that means life is nearby. Your body tenses without thinking. You move slower, heel to toe, letting the rhythm of your steps blend with the whisper of the wind. Through the trees ahead, a flicker of motion catches your eye. A mule deer stands among the brush, head bowed, breath puffing white from its nostrils. You steady your aim, exhale, and fire. The sound crashes through the valley, startling birds from their branches. When the echo fades, you walk forward, heart heavy with both relief and sorrow. The deer lies still, its eyes glassy. You murmur a quiet word of thanks before beginning the hard work that follows. Some letters from traders mention that hunters often sang softly as they dressed their kills, a habit that made the grim task feel human again. You hum something tuneless as you work, breath steaming, hands steady despite the cold. By noon, the meat is packed into bundles and wrapped in hide. You will smoke it later, after returning to camp. The smell of blood and pine fills the air, sharp and earthy. You wipe your knife on the snow, watching the crimson melt into white. As you trudge back toward your cabin, you think about how fragile this balance truly is. Food means life, but it also attracts danger. Wolves have keen noses, and the smell of fresh kill is a summons they never ignore. It was noted in frontier journals that men sometimes hung their meat in trees or buried it under ice to keep predators away. Others claimed to sleep beside their stores with rifles ready, preferring to fight rather than lose everything. You glance at the surrounding woods, half expecting yellow eyes to gleam back. The path home feels longer under the weight of the pack. The cold digs into your shoulders, and your legs ache from the uneven snow. When you finally see the outline of your cabin, a flicker of gratitude warms you more than the fire waiting inside. You unload the meat and begin cutting it into strips for drying. Smoke curls through the chimney, carrying the scent of burning pine. The air inside grows hazy, thick with the aroma of fat and wood. You hang the strips from poles, watching the droplets of grease sizzle in the heat. Some trappers experimented with odd preservation methods, mixing meat with berries or covering it in melted tallow. One diary even mentions meat packed in snow and sealed with ash to last until spring. The ingenuity of hunger has no limits. You sit near the fire, hands raw, knife resting across your knees. The world outside has turned to grey twilight, the kind that arrives early and overstays its welcome. The sound of dripping fat mingles with the crackle of wood. You let the warmth soak into your bones. Experts today still discuss how these solitary men managed such endurance. Was it skill, instinct, or something deeper, a refusal to let the wilderness win? You think about it, staring into the fire, and decide it might be a bit of all three. When the last strips are hung, you step outside again. The sky is bruised with the colors of dusk. Snow begins to fall, slow and soft, erasing your tracks as quickly as they form. You look up, feeling the flakes melt on your skin. The storm is gentle now, but you know what comes next. You return inside and close the door, sealing yourself in with the smell of smoke and venison. The walls creak as the temperature drops, the sound like distant whispers. You lie back on your bedding, exhausted but satisfied. The fire burns low. Outside, the snow thickens until the cabin feels buried in silence. You think about how every meal, every fire, every breath out here is borrowed time. Survival is not a victory. It is a truce with nature, one you must renew daily. Your eyes grow heavy. The room glows faintly from the dying embers. The smell of smoked meat lingers in the air, mingling with the faint sweetness of pine. You let that scent pull you towards sleep, your mind drifting through the memory of snow, fire, and quiet gratitude. The storm lasts through the night into the next day, wrapping the mountains in silence so deep it feels sacred. When you finally push open the door, the snow outside is waist high, smooth as silk, untouched by anything living. The light is dazzling, a blinding white that makes you squint and turn away. Your eyes ache. The reflection off the snow cuts like glass. Even with your fur hood drawn tight, it feels as if the world is made of mirrors. You blink hard, trying to focus, but the brightness lingers like fire behind your eyelids. Old expedition logs describe this condition with dread: snow blindness. The glare from the endless white burns the eyes as surely as the desert sun burns the skin. Men caught in it stumble, weep, and lose their way. Some rubbed soot or charcoal under their eyes, believing it dulled the glare. Others crafted narrow slits in scraps of wood or bone, creating primitive goggles that shaded their vision. You wish you had thought of that yesterday. You return inside, blinking furiously, vision reduced to blurred shadows. The fire still smoulders in the hearth. You sit beside it, hands pressed to your face, waiting for the sharp pain to fade. The darkness inside the cabin feels like a blessing. After a while, your sight steadies enough to make out the shapes of your tools, the walls, the steady curl of smoke. You stare into the flames, watching them flicker and change. Light, you realize, can be both savior and enemy here. Outside, the world glows under a sky so pale it feels empty. You know better than to wander too far now. The snow hides crevices and hollows, and one careless step could end in a buried fall. You stay close to the cabin, checking your traps nearby. In one, you find a snowshoe hare perfectly caught. Its fur is white, nearly invisible against snow. You handle it gently, murmuring to the quiet air. Every life here feels earned, even taken. You carry it back, skin it quickly, and set the pelt aside. The fur will line your gloves later, soft armor against the wind. A curious entry from a trapper's account tells how some men in deep winter began to talk to their tools and fire as companions. Not madness, he wrote, just the only way to hear another voice. You understand that now. The silence is heavy, pressing against your thoughts until you fill it with words, even whispered ones. By midday, a strange stillness takes hold. The air feels brittle, sharp enough to cut. The snow reflects so much light that color itself seems to vanish. The sky and ground merge into one vast whiteness, and you stand in between, dizzy and small. You close your eyes for relief, and in the black behind your lids, the world feels safer. The sound of your own breathing becomes a kind of rhythm. You count each inhale as if to remind yourself that you are still here, still separate from the mountain that seems intent on swallowing you whole. When you open your eyes again, a flicker of movement catches your attention. Far off, near a ridge, a shape moves slowly across the snow. A man, perhaps, or maybe only a trick of the light. You watch for a long moment, unsure if it is real. The glare makes it impossible to tell. Eventually, the shape vanishes. You stand there for a while, staring at the empty horizon, wondering if solitude can create ghosts. Modern researchers still discuss how prolonged isolation affects the senses. Some argue that solitude sharpens perception. Others say it blurs the line between imagination and reality. You decide it does both. Out here, your mind must stay busy, or it will invent company where none exists. You spend the afternoon patching small holes in the roof, melting snow for water, and checking the fire's heat. Every task feels slower, heavier. The brightness outside leaves your head throbbing, and you wrap a strip of cloth around your eyes to ease the sting. The faint darkness beneath it feels like comfort. By evening, the world turns to silver. The snow reflects the moonlight so completely that it feels as if the stars have fallen to earth. You step outside briefly, the cold biting at your cheeks, and stand in awe of the brightness that does not come from the sun. The air smells clean, untouched, almost holy. You take a deep breath and listen. Somewhere far away, ice cracks in the stillness, a low groan that echoes off the cliffs. The sound rolls through the valley like a warning. You step back inside and close the door behind you, shutting out the light. The fire flickers, steady and calm. You sit cross-legged beside it, eyes closed, hands cupped over your knees. The warmth seeps slowly into your skin. For a moment, You think about the first mountain men who endured this same cold and light, their faces blistered by sun reflecting off snow, their minds teetering between awe and exhaustion. Some journals hint that a few went blind for weeks, surviving only by touch and instinct. You lean back against the log wall, listening to the fire's steady breathing. The pain in your eyes fades to a dull throb. You know you will need to craft proper snow goggles soon, perhaps from bone or bark, before the next long hunt. You think about it as the light outside dims and the shadows stretch long. Before sleep, you lift your gaze to the smoke curling upward, disappearing into the roof vent. The line between earth and sky has blurred for days now, and in your weary thoughts you imagine the mountains breathing along with you. Every sound, every flicker of light feels alive. You let that thought settle as your eyes close. Tomorrow will bring new dangers, but tonight the snow has gone quiet again. The cabin is warm, your fire steady, and the cold world outside feels distant for a little while. The dawn comes slow and silent. You wake to a pale light seeping through the cracks in the shutters, soft as milk, the kind of light that carries no warmth at all. The fire in the hearth has turned to embers, dull and red, like the eyes of something half asleep. You stir it gently with a stick until a few sparks leap back to life, whispering upward into the cold air. Outside, the world is still buried in snow. You step out carefully, rifle slung across your shoulder, breath clouding in front of you. The snow crunches under your boots with a sound like breaking glass. The forest feels frozen in time, each branch heavy with white, each sound swallowed by distance. Today you go to check your traps again, this time farther from the cabin, near the frozen river where the animals still move. It is dangerous to go alone so far from warmth, but hunger is patient and will not wait. You tie a strip of fur around your face to shield from the wind, testing your footing as you walk. According to accounts left by trappers in the 1830s, this was the time of year when tracking became an art of desperation. Snow turned the land into a blank page, and only the smallest traces betrayed life. You think of that as you scan the ground, searching for any sign of movement. Then you see it, a set of tracks, faint but distinct, pressed deep into the snow. Not fresh, but not old either. You crouch, running your gloved fingers along the print. The edges are sharp, the pattern wide. Elk, you guess. A large one. The tracks wind along the edge of the trees before curving toward the riverbank. You follow slowly, every sense awake. The silence feels alive around you. Every step you take sounds louder than it should. Somewhere far away, you hear the crack of ice shifting on the river, a low groan that echoes like thunder. You move closer, the sound of your own breathing loud in your ears. In the distance, the river stretches like a sheet of silver, frozen solid except for a dark seam in the middle, where water still flows beneath the surface. You spot more tracks there, mingled now with smaller ones. Rabbit, maybe fox. The snow tells the story of 1,000 quiet struggles you will never witness. A note found in a trader's letter once described how the best trappers read tracks as though they were written words. A wide print meant wait, a broken twig told direction. A scatter of snow showed panic. Out here, the land itself speaks, if you are patient enough to listen. You crouch by a fallen tree, setting a new snare. The motion is practiced now. You twist the wire, wedge it between roots, dust snow lightly over it. The trick is to make the world look untouched again, as if your presence were never here. The irony makes you smile. You depend on what you can catch, yet you must pretend you are invisible. As you move, something catches your eye near the river's edge. A single print, deeper than the rest, long and narrow. You freeze. It is not from an animal. It is a boot print, half filled with new snow, pointing upstream. Someone else has walked this way. You feel your pulse quicken. There are no friendly faces this deep in winter. A stranger could mean trade, or trouble, or both. You scan the horizon but see nothing but white. The silence feels heavier now, almost listening. You wait a long while before continuing, moving slowly, careful not to leave your own trail too obvious. The print fades as the wind shifts, and soon it disappears altogether. Maybe it was old. Maybe it was yours from another day. The mind plays tricks in this light. You finish checking the rest of the traps, collecting 2 more rabbits and a fox. The fox's fur gleams silver-grey under the snow, beautiful even in death. You pause to admire it before wrapping it carefully in cloth. As you turn back toward the cabin, the light begins to fade. The journey home always feels longer, the snow deeper, the air colder. The wind rises behind you, brushing at your back like a hand. You glance over your shoulder once, half expecting to see that single print again, but there is only whiteness. Many explorers wrote that the greatest enemy in the mountains was not hunger or cold, but the imagination itself. Alone too long, a man begins to doubt what is real. You tell yourself you are not one of those men, but the thought lingers anyway. When the cabin comes into view, relief settles over you like warmth. Smoke still curls from the chimney. You step inside quickly, stamping snow from your boots. The smell of smoke and old fur greets you like an old friend. You hang the meat by the door and lay the pelts near the fire to dry. The room feels smaller tonight, the shadows thicker. You listen to the wind outside, sharp and steady, like whispers between the trees. You light another log, watching the flames spread and grow. The fire's glow dances across your tools, your rifle, your traps. Everything feels both familiar and slightly wrong, as if rearranged by unseen hands. You eat sparingly, saving most for the days to come. The fox pelt lies beside you, silver in the firelight. You touch it once, tracing the fur with your fingers, and think about what life must be like for a creature born to thrive in this endless white. You envy its certainty. Before sleep, you step outside again. The stars burn sharp above you, countless and close. The snow gleams under their light, untouched and endless. You think about the tracks you saw earlier, now buried under the drifting powder. Whoever left them, man or ghost, is gone. You breathe deeply, the air cutting through your chest like frost. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls, long and low. You listen until the sound fades into the night, then turn back inside. The cabin door closes behind you with a soft thud. The fire's warmth greets you, wrapping you in its glow. Outside, the wind keeps its secrets. Inside, you keep yours. For now, that feels fair. Sleep does not come easily anymore. The night stretched too long, the silence too wide. You wake often, unsure of what pulled you from dreams, the wind, the crackle of the fire, or something else entirely. Tonight feels heavier than usual, as if the air itself presses closer. You sit up, listening. Outside, the world is hushed. Even the wind has stopped moving. It feels like the mountains are holding their breath. The stillness hums in your ears until you cannot bear it. You reach for your coat, light a stub of candle, and sit at the edge of the bedroll. The flickering light throws shadows that sway along the cabin walls like slow dancers. Loneliness is a sound out here, not just a feeling. It whispers through the cracks in the logs and settles behind your ribs. You have not seen another human face in weeks, and though the quiet once felt peaceful, it now feels like something alive, something watching. Letters written by early trappers mention the same creeping unease. Some spoke to their fires, others carved faces into logs just to have someone to look at. One account told of a man who kept a skull on his mantle and called it partner. You are not there yet, but you understand him. You brew weak coffee, more habit than need. The bitter smell cuts through the still air. You take small sips, staring at the flame. The heat feels good against your hands. Each sip seems to anchor you back in the world. Outside, an owl calls from the trees, low and steady. You listen, grateful for the sound, for proof that something else is awake. Then, almost immediately, another sound joins it, a faint crack, like a footstep in the snow. You freeze. You hold your breath, waiting. The sound comes again, closer this time. Your fingers tighten around the rifle resting by the hearth. The cabin feels smaller, the walls thinner. You rise quietly and move toward the window. Frost covers the glass, but through the tiny gap you scrape clear with your thumb, you see only darkness. A story once told in a trader's camp warned of how the mind tricks lonely men into hearing company where there is none. The wilderness does not speak, they said, it only echoes. You repeat that to yourself, half to believe it. Minutes pass, then maybe an hour. Nothing stirs again. The fire burns lower, the candle shortens, and you begin to feel foolish. You set the rifle back down and sit once more by the fire. The logs shift softly, sending up a small shower of sparks. The quiet becomes almost comforting again. You think about how the mind creates rhythm just to survive, watching flames, counting breaths, tracing cracks in the wall. Out here, repetition is a kind of sanity. Researchers studying long expeditions later wrote about how isolation bends time. Days stretch, nights repeat, and soon a man cannot tell one from another. You feel that truth in your bones. Each sunrise feels like the same one returning, too stubborn to fade. You take out your small journal, the pages curled and stained from smoke. The pencil feels rough between your fingers. You write slowly, words uneven. Still alive, still quiet, still me. It feels strange to see your thoughts outside your head. You close the book, tuck it away, and smile faintly. Maybe someone will read it one day and wonder who you were. The candle gutters, flame shrinking to a bead of light. You lie back again, pulling the fur blanket to your chin. The air smells of smoke and cold earth. You listen for another sound, but hear only the faint creak of the roof adjusting to the frost. Before your eyes close, you think about the mountains beyond your walls. Somewhere out there, wolves prowl through the drifts, elk move in small herds, and the rivers sleep under their ice. You are part of that now, one more creature, simply enduring. You dream of faces you barely remember, a woman laughing near a river, a man shouting something from a distance, a child running through tall grass. The images flicker like firelight, impossible to hold. When you wake, it is still dark, and for a moment you are unsure where you are. Then the smell of smoke brings you back. Outside, snow begins to fall again, soft and endless. You can hear it against the roof, a faint, rhythmic patter. The loneliness does not leave, but it quiets, becomes something you can live with. You wrap the blanket tighter and close your eyes once more. There is peace in the small things, the warmth of the fire, the steady breath, the heartbeat that continues because it must. The mountain keeps its silence, and you keep yours. Somewhere in the stillness, the two begin to sound the same. When the next morning arrives, it does not come with sunlight, but with the faint grey of another storm waiting to happen. The wind outside carries a low moan, the kind that travels through trees and finds its way into the bones of the cabin. You rise slowly, your joints stiff from another night of shallow sleep. The fire has burned down to a thin line of embers, and the air inside smells faintly of smoke and damp wood. Today you decide to travel down the valley toward the trading post, if it is still open and standing. It has been weeks since you last saw another person, and your supplies are thinning. The thought of voices, laughter, or even the clatter of tools feels like something from another world. You gather a bundle of furs, roll them tight, and secure them with a strip of hide. The path to the fort is long and cruel. According to old accounts from the early fur trade, some men walked 20 or 30 miles through snow to reach a post where they could barter their hides for salt, tobacco, or ammunition. Those journeys often took days, and many never made it back. Still, you shoulder your pack and step into the cold, trusting your memory to guide you through the white maze ahead. The air is sharp, the wind biting at your face. Each breath stings like inhaling needles. The sky hangs low, pressing on the peaks, while flakes begin to drift lazily around you. You walk steadily, the snow creaking beneath your boots, each step measured, deliberate. As the miles pass, the valley opens into a stretch of flat land broken only by frozen willow and clusters of pine. You can smell water beneath the ice somewhere nearby. The sound of ravens echoes faintly, their voices harsh against the stillness. You think of the first time you made this walk, when the world still felt wide and welcoming. Now it feels ancient and watchful. At midday, you stop to rest by a fallen tree. You light a small fire with the coals you carried from home, feeding it twigs and bark until the flames catch. The warmth feels fragile in this endless cold. You take out a piece of dried meat and chew slowly, the flavor flat but familiar. A record written by a trader named Fontenelle once described these winter gatherings as both business and salvation. Mountain men would limp into the forts half frozen, clothes torn, eyes sunken, yet they laughed louder than any city dweller. For a few days, they could pretend they were civilized again. When you finally see the smoke rising from the distant fort, you feel relief deep in your chest. The small wooden structure crouches against the mountain's base, its walls blackened by years of weather and fire. As you approach, a pair of dogs bark, their voices cutting through the quiet. The door creaks open, and a man steps out. His face is half hidden by a scarf, his beard stiff with frost. He nods at you without surprise, as if mountain men appear from the snow every day. Inside, the air smells of tallow, tobacco, and wet fur. The dim light flickers over barrels and crates stacked against the walls. You unroll your bundle of hides across the counter. The trader inspects them silently, fingers rough but precise. "Fair skins," he mutters. He weighs them in his mind before offering you salt, flour, and a few bullets in trade. You nod. Words feel unnecessary here. Others sit near the fire in the corner, 3 men, each wrapped in layers of ragged coats, their faces lean and windburned. One of them looks up, nods once in quiet greeting. They share whiskey from a tin cup, passing it without speech. The sound of the fire and the faint clink of metal are the only reminders that life still moves. A curious entry from a missionary's letter described how these posts became sanctuaries of contradiction, half storehouse, half refuge. Men traded furs and food, but also stories, ghost tales of men lost to avalanches or creatures seen in the fog. You listen in silence as one of the trappers speaks of a storm farther west, snow so thick it buried a camp overnight. You nod, pretending not to feel the dread curling inside you. When your supplies are packed again, you take one last sip of whiskey offered by the men, its burn waking your senses. You thank them quietly and step back into the cold. The fort's door closes behind you with a groan, and the valley swallows the sound. The snow begins again, light at first but steady. You tighten your pack straps and start the long walk home. Each step feels heavier with the weight of silence returning. Yet something inside you feels steadier now. The firelight, the murmur of voices, even the brief human warmth have reminded you what you are fighting to stay alive for. The path back winds along the river. You follow it carefully, the current hidden beneath the thick ice. The sound of rushing water below is faint but constant, a reminder that not everything here is frozen. You stop once, kneel, and press your gloved hand to the ice. The vibration hums faintly beneath your palm like a heartbeat. By the time the cabin comes into view, the light has faded to blue. Smoke still curls from the chimney, a small, faithful promise against the endless dark. You push open the door, the warmth hitting you like an embrace. The smell of wood smoke fills your lungs. You unpack your supplies and sit near the fire, listening to the logs crackle. In the corner, your traps glint faintly, ready for the next day's work. You stretch your legs, feeling exhaustion seep into every muscle. As the fire burns lower, you think about the men at the post, their laughter still echoing faintly in your ears. You realize that the wild teaches more than endurance. It teaches you the value of every small comfort, a sip of whiskey, a word shared, the warmth of another fire. You close your eyes and let that warmth linger until sleep finds you again, slow and deep. The wolves come when the moon grows full. You hear them before you ever see their shapes. their calls rising through the frozen air like music written for no human ear. The sound begins faintly, far off among the ridges, but soon it gathers others until the whole valley seems to hum with their voices. It is not frightening at first, only strange, like being reminded that something out there still remembers how to sing. You stand at the doorway, listening. The sound carries through the pines, rolling down toward the river. It grows louder, closer, until you can feel the vibration against your chest. You know what it means. Somewhere nearby, hunger is awake. Travel journals from the 1,820 seconds describe winter nights when trappers would sit for hours beside the fire, rifles across their knees, waiting for that long, mournful call. Wolves were rarely seen but always felt. The men spoke of them with a mix of respect and fear, calling them the mountain's other survivors. You understand that now better than any book could explain. You check your traps in the morning and find one torn apart, the steel twisted, the snow stained faintly red. You kneel and study the scene, noting the scattered fur, the deep claw marks. Wolves are clever, more cautious than any predator you know. They can smell iron, sense traps, even circle for hours before deciding it is safe to strike. You touch the broken chain and feel a quiet admiration for their patience. You set the trap again, this time deeper in the snow, covered carefully. Then you head back toward the cabin, scanning the tree line. The forest is beautiful but uneasy, filled with a silence that feels almost intelligent. You catch glimpses of motion now and then, shadows slipping between trees. The hair on your neck rises. A line from an old fur company ledger mentions that trappers often left food scraps far from camp to distract predators. You do the same, tossing pieces of dried meat into the snow several hundred yards away. It is a small offering to the wilderness, a hope that the wolves will take what they need and move on. That night, the howling begins again, louder this time, nearer. You sit inside, your rifle resting against your shoulder, the fire throwing red light across the floor. The cabin walls creak softly with each gust of wind. Then you hear the crunch of paws outside, the faint brush of something against the logs. You freeze, hardly daring to breathe. The sound circles once, then fades. A low growl rises, followed by another, and then silence again. You can feel them just beyond the thin wooden walls, curious, perhaps cautious. One peculiar story from a mountain man's notebook tells of wolves that followed him for 7 nights straight, never attacking, only watching. He said he began to feel less hunted and more accompanied, as if they accepted him as another creature trapped by the same hunger. You think of that now, sitting by your fire, listening to the breathing of the night. The firelight dances across the walls, throwing wild shapes that move like ghosts. You stare into the flames until your vision blurs. The heat makes your eyelids heavy, but you do not sleep. You know that the wolves will not attack a strong flame, but you also know the flame must not die. Outside, the howling returns, rising and falling like waves. It feels less like threat and more like conversation now, the mountain speaking through its oldest voices. You listen, imagining the pack gathered somewhere nearby, fur dusted with frost, eyes glowing in the pale light. Toward dawn, the sound fades away. You step outside cautiously, the snow glittering under the faint pink of sunrise. The tracks are everywhere, weaving in circles around the cabin, then leading off toward the ridge. You follow a few steps, noting how deep the impressions go, how many paws pressed into the snow. There must have been at least 10 of them, maybe more. You stop when the prints disappear into the trees. In the stillness that follows, you feel a strange calm. The fear has drained away, leaving only awe. These creatures live by instinct alone, and somehow you envy that purity. No questions, no doubt, only survival. As you walk back, the snow crunches beneath your boots in the same rhythm that the wolves' paws must have made. You glance at the distant peaks, now painted gold by the morning sun, and realize how small your place is here. You are just one more living thing enduring the same rules. You feed the fire again, cook a thin broth, and eat slowly. The warmth fills you just enough to keep the cold away. The cabin smells of wood smoke and melted fat. For the first time in weeks, you feel a quiet connection to something beyond yourself. The day passes without noise. You mend a few traps, sharpen your knife, polish your rifle. The routine feels steadying. Outside, ravens pick at the scraps you left, their wings flashing black against the snow. Life continues in its own quiet rhythm. When night returns, you listen for the wolves again, but the valley stays silent. You find that you miss their voices. You sit by the fire until late, thinking about how thin the line is between fear and reverence. The wilderness has a way of teaching lessons without words. As you drift towards sleep, you whisper softly to the empty room, not expecting an answer. The sound of your own voice feels strange, yet somehow right. The fire crackles, the walls groan, and the cold presses at the door. But for now, you are safe. You let the warmth of the memory of those howls carry you into dreams. The river looks calm from a distance, but you know better. Beneath the frozen surface, the water still runs black and fast, strong enough to drag a man under in seconds. You step closer, each boot sinking deep into the powder. The ice groans faintly under your weight, a sound that tightens your chest. Crossing rivers is part of the mountain man's life. You have done it before, sometimes with confidence, sometimes with fear hidden under a grin. Today, fear feels honest. The water here is swollen from snowmelt higher in the peaks. The layer of ice is thick, but not thick enough to trust. Accounts from fur traders describe how men would test the ice by laying a long pole across it and crawling, spreading their weight to avoid cracking through. Others led their mules first, believing that if the animal made it, they might too. You have neither mule nor company, so you rely on instinct and patience. You crouch, listen to the river's muffled voice beneath your boots, then shift forward. The sound deepens, a slow, distant rumble like thunder in the earth. You freeze. The crack that follows is small, but it echoes up your legs. You back away carefully, retracing each step until you reach solid ground again. The wind stings your face. You stand breathing hard, staring at the surface that nearly took you. The ice looks innocent, smooth and white, but you know now that it hides more danger than any predator in these mountains. You decide to find another place to cross. You walk along the bank, watching for narrow points where rocks rise through the snow. The air smells faintly of pine and cold water. Your breath fogs the air in steady bursts. Somewhere behind you, a raven caws, its voice breaking the stillness. You glance up and see it circling lazily, a dark shape against the pale sky. One explorer's diary mentioned that men who traveled alone often took signs from animals as guidance. A fox crossing your path meant good luck. A raven meant change. You smile at the thought. Maybe the bird is telling you to slow down. After a mile or two, you find a section where the river narrows between boulders. The ice there looks thicker, layered by days of freezing and refreezing. You test it again with your pole. It holds. Slowly, you step onto the surface, feeling it flex beneath you. Each breath feels louder than it should. The sound of running water rises under your feet like a whisper. Halfway across, you hear it again, the faint, fragile crack of shifting ice. You stop. The air feels heavy, still. You crouch low, spreading your weight, and wait for the sound to fade. It does, slowly, leaving you with only the rush of blood in your ears. You move again, one careful inch at a time. When you reach the other side, you exhale, a long breath you did not realize you were holding. Your legs tremble, but relief warms you more than the sun ever could. You sit for a moment on the bank, staring at the river you have just crossed, and laugh softly. It is not joy exactly, but gratitude. Travelers' journals from that time often spoke of rivers with both fear and reverence. They were lifelines and barriers, givers and takers. Men built their lives along them, yet cursed them every spring when the floods came. Looking at the frozen water now, you understand that contradiction. The trail beyond the river climbs steeply through the trees. Snow clings to every branch, and your boots slip often on the icy ground. You rest your hand on the trunk of a pine for balance, feeling the bark rough beneath your glove. Each step is a battle against gravity and exhaustion, but you keep going. By afternoon, the light begins to fade. The sun hides behind a thick bank of clouds, and the world turns the color of pewter. You know you will not make it home before dark, so you search for shelter. You find a hollow under a fallen tree, sheltered from the wind. You clear the snow, line the space with branches, and light a small fire. The flames flicker weakly at first, then grow, throwing orange light onto the frozen wood. The warmth creeps slowly into your fingers. You roast a small piece of dried meat and chew it in silence. The river murmurs faintly below, its voice steady and low. While you eat, you think about how many lives have ended on rivers like that. Some from slips, some from misjudgment, others from the simple bad luck of timing. Historians still study the ledgers that record such losses, cold lists of names and dates, but those records miss the part that matters most. The sound, the fear, the decision to take one more step. You sit watching the fire, lost in the rhythm of its crackling. The orange light dances on the snow, reflecting like stars scattered at your feet. You add another log and pull your coat tighter. The night deepens around you, but the fear has passed. You have crossed the river, and that small victory feels enormous. In the stillness, you hear the ice shifting far away, a deep groan rolling down the valley. It sounds like the mountain sighing in its sleep. You smile, stretch out beside the fire, and close your eyes. Tomorrow you will climb higher, set new traps, and perhaps forget this crossing. But tonight, you rest, warm and alive beside the whispering water. The cold sickness begins quietly, like a secret you do not want to acknowledge. It starts with a shiver that will not leave, then the ache behind your eyes, the kind that makes the world blur at the edges. You tell yourself it is nothing, that you have weathered worse. But by noon, your skin burns with fever even as your breath still clouds the air. You sit by the fire, staring into the flames, trying to steady your hands. Each inhale rattles, and your throat feels raw. The air smells faintly of smoke, leather and pine, but you cannot taste your food anymore. Every swallow hurts. There are no doctors here, no medicine but what you make yourself. You remember hearing an old trapper's advice once at a trading post: whiskey for pain, willow bark for fever, and rest if you can afford it. You have no whiskey left, so you gather what little you can find: a few shavings of bark, some pine resin, a strip of clean snowmelt water, and brew a bitter tea. The taste is sharp, earthy, almost unbearable. You drink it anyway. Historical letters from the Rocky Mountain camps mention how illness came without warning. Men who had survived battles with grizzly bears or blizzards were often undone by a cough that would not fade. Some suspected bad air, others blamed spoiled food or isolation. Whatever the cause, winter sickness was as feared as frostbite. You lie back against the furs, the fever pulsing behind your eyes. The world seems to sway gently. You think of sunlight on water, of grass that bends in wind, of everything far away from this frozen valley. The cabin creaks around you, shifting like an old ship at sea. At some point, you wake to the sound of the fire hissing low. The light is dim, the air heavy with the scent of ash. You drag yourself to your knees, feeding the flames with the last of the dry wood. The heat feels distant, unable to reach where it hurts most. In the fog of exhaustion, your thoughts wander. You imagine someone finding your cabin in spring, footprints frozen into the floorboards, your journal half finished. Maybe they will read your words and wonder what kind of man you were. The thought is strangely comforting. An odd recollection surfaces: a note from an explorer's diary describing a man who claimed that the fever spoke to him in dreams. He said he saw figures of light walking through snow, silent and kind. You think about that as you drift again, half dreaming, half listening to the mountain breathe outside. The fever deepens through the night. You sweat despite the cold, the heat rolling off you in waves. Every sound grows distant. You hear the wind through the cracks, whispering in a language you almost understand. At times, you think you see movement in the corners of the room, shadows shifting like visitors waiting for permission to speak. You dream that you are walking through endless snow, barefoot, unafraid. The moon is bright, the air warm, and every breath feels easy. Somewhere ahead, you hear laughter the kind you have not heard in months. You follow it, though the sound never grows closer. When you finally wake, the fire has gone out. The cold bites immediately. You shiver violently, crawling toward your flint and steel. Your hands are clumsy, but you strike until a spark catches, feeding it slowly with bark and dried grass. When the flames rise again, you sit back, shaking but grateful. The fever has broken a little. Your body feels drained, empty as a hollow log, yet you can breathe more easily. Trappers' journals mention how men marked recovery by hunger. You take that as a good sign when your stomach growls for the first time in 2 days. You cut a thin strip of dried meat and chew it slowly, savoring its rough salt. It tastes like life returning. The snow outside glows blue in the weak light of dawn. You pull on your coat and open the door to let in fresh air. It stings your lungs, but it feels clean. You stand for a moment, eyes closed, breathing deeply. The sickness has left you fragile, but alive. Some records tell of men who credited faith or luck for surviving such fevers. Others admitted it was simply stubbornness, the refusal to lie down and let the cold win. You think it might be that. You have not come this far to vanish into the snow. You gather more wood, chop slowly, rest often. Each swing of the axe feels like a heartbeat. The rhythm steadies your thoughts. You know the fever will return if you do not care for yourself, so you work carefully, quietly, letting the mountain's silence guide your pace. By nightfall, the cabin feels different. The air is warmer, the fire stronger. You wrap yourself in furs and sip another cup of the bitter tea. Outside, the stars have returned, glittering like ice scattered across a black river. You watch them through the small window, feeling something close to peace. The illness has reminded you of something simple, that life here is always borrowed, never owned. Every breath, every flame, every meal is a trade between you and the wilderness. You offer your strength, and in return, it allows you one more day. You lie down, pull the blanket to your chin, and close your eyes. The fever is fading now, leaving only the ache of survival behind. The wind outside hums softly, a sound like distant song. You listen to it until you drift into sleep, your mind finally still. The morning after, the fever feels like waking into a world that has been rebuilt overnight. The air outside is sharp but clean, the snow glittering beneath the soft light of dawn. You breathe deeply, letting the cold fill your lungs until your chest burns, and for the first time in days, it feels good to feel anything at all. You eat a small breakfast, then check your traps, moving slower than usual. Each step leaves a perfect print behind you, sharp and deliberate. The forest hums with quiet life again. Tiny sounds you had forgotten to notice, the creak of trees, faint scratching of small animals beneath the snow, the distant crack of ice splitting on the river. You reach your first trap and find it empty. The second holds the crushed remains of a rabbit, the steel jaws biting clean. You kneel to reset it, the motion automatic. Your fingers, still weak, fumble with the spring. The cold metal bites your skin, but you do not stop. A field report from the Hudson's Bay Company once described how skilled trappers could set 10 steel traps in less than an hour, each with its own secret pattern of placement and scent. The work required patience and precision, a ritual learned through repetition. You find yourself repeating each movement exactly as you remember it, almost prayerfully. You move to the next trap and stop when you see the tracks in the snow, large, deep, pacing in circles around the set. Wolf again. or perhaps mountain lion. The prints are fresh. You squat, touching the edge of one with your glove. The snow is still soft there. You straighten slowly, feeling watched. Your rifle feels heavier than usual, though you keep it close. You scan the trees but see nothing, only the soft flicker of sunlight between branches. You wait a long moment, listening, but the forest offers no clue. Eventually you move on, carefully, eyes sweeping the ground for more signs. By noon, you have reached the last trap near the ridge. It holds a beaver, caught neatly by the leg. You kneel to free it and notice the faint shimmer of frost clinging to its whiskers. The body is heavy, its fur thick and perfect. You whisper a quiet thanks as you work. Every catch means another piece of life, another trade waiting in spring. Back at the cabin, you hang the new pelts to dry beside the others. The smell of hide and smoke fills the air, strong but strangely comforting. You sit by the fire, cleaning your traps with slow, deliberate strokes. Each scar on the metal tells its own story, where the teeth of a bear once snapped, where the frost bent a spring beyond repair. In the journals of old trappers, they often wrote about their tools as if they were friends or rivals. A trap was more than iron. It was an extension of the man who used it. To lose one was to lose a part of yourself. You look at your own collection now, rusted, scarred, but loyal. The rhythm of the work soothes you. Brush, oil, sharpen, test. The faint metallic scrape fills the small space like music. You wipe your brow and smile faintly. Out here, skill is worth more than luck. As evening falls, you notice the red streak of sunset over the ridge, faint but beautiful. The light spills through the cracks in the shutters, washing the walls in gold. You stretch, feeling the ache of honest labor. The fever has left your limbs, replaced by a steadier warmth. You remember something an old man once said at a trading post. Every scar you carry is a lesson that did not kill you. You glance at the cuts across your knuckles, the half-healed burn on your wrist, and think how right he was. Each mark is proof that you learned something the hard way. You patch a hole in one of your gloves using sinew and a bit of fox fur. The thread pulls tight with a soft creak, and you trim the end with your knife. The smell of tanned hide mixes with pine smoke, earthy and familiar. You lean closer to the fire, letting the glow warm your face. Experts who study frontier life often note how repetition became its own form of sanity. Men found comfort in fixing what broke, in sharpening tools that might never be used again. You understand that now. The act itself is survival, a quiet defiance against decay. Outside, the night deepens. The cold presses against the walls, but inside your small circle of light, the world feels steady. You hang your traps in a neat row beside the door, their steel glinting in the firelight. Each one is ready for tomorrow, each one a promise of work and endurance. You settle into your furs, tired but content. The fire crackles softly, throwing tiny sparks upward. Your hands smell of iron and ash. As you close your eyes, you think about the delicate balance between hunter and hunted, builder and destroyer, man and mountain. The silence returns, deep and soft. But now it feels like a companion rather than a threat. You breathe slowly, letting the warmth seep into your bones. The scars, the traps, the small victories, they all belong to this life. And tonight, this life still belongs to you. The nights are longer now, stretching endlessly until you begin to wonder if the sun has forgotten you. The cold feels sharper too, creeping into your bones even when the fire burns high. You wake before dawn, the air so still that every breath sounds like breaking glass. Your body moves through the motions automatically, yet your mind drifts elsewhere, caught between memory and exhaustion. You sit by the fire, holding a cup of melted snow, watching the steam curl like ghosts through the cabin air. The days have begun to blend together, one into the next, until time itself feels circular. You cannot remember when you last saw a sky not colored by snow. Sometimes, when the silence grows too deep, your thoughts wander to warmer seasons. You picture spring, the melt of the river, the sound of birds returning, the grass bending under your boots. You imagine summer, when the mountain meadows explode with color, when even the wind smells alive. But it feels distant now, like something you once dreamed instead of lived. A letter from a fur trapper named Osborne Russell spoke of this same weariness. He wrote that during the worst months, men often talked aloud to themselves to remember the sound of their own voices. He admitted that sometimes he forgot what laughter felt like. You read his words long ago and had not understood them. Now you do. You pull your coat tighter and step outside. The cold bites instantly at your cheeks. The world is white in every direction, glowing faintly under the pale morning light. You walk a few paces away from the cabin, snow squeaking under your boots. The air is so clean it almost hurts to breathe. The mountains rise in the distance, their peaks hidden by cloud. You feel small before them, as if standing in the presence of something sacred and ancient. You understand why some of the old trappers called these ranges the cathedrals of silence. They demand reverence without words. Your breath fogs in steady rhythm as you make your way toward the edge of the ridge. There you stop and look out over the valley below. The frozen river gleams faintly through the snow, winding like a silver scar across the land. You close your eyes and listen. The sound of wind moving through the pines is soft, almost like whispering. For a moment, you feel at peace. Then the ache of solitude returns, heavy and slow. It settles behind your ribs, familiar but unwelcome. You realize that months have passed since you last spoke to another living soul. The thought stings worse than the cold. One explorer's diary describes how men in winter sometimes began to talk to their absent loved ones as if they were near. He called it conversation with ghosts. You understand that too now. At night, when the fire burns low, you catch yourself whispering answers to voices that exist only in memory. You return to the cabin and stir the fire back to life. The room fills with orange light, and shadows crawl across the walls. You sit down beside the hearth, legs stretched, staring at the flames. The warmth feels almost tender. On the shelf beside you lies a scrap of paper and a stub of pencil. You pick them up and begin to write, though you do not know to whom. The words come slowly, unevenly. The snow has swallowed the path, you write. The wolves sing less now. I think they are wiser than I am. They know when to rest. You stop, reading the lines back to yourself, and smile faintly. Perhaps no one will ever see them, but it feels good to set them down. Outside, the sky darkens again. The sun barely lifts above the horizon before fading back into shadow. The mountains vanish into a blur of white and grey. You light another candle and continue writing, not about fear or hunger this time, but about the beauty hidden inside the struggle. Historians later wrote that many trappers became poets without meaning to. Their journals, rough and simple, turned into maps of emotion more than geography. You think about that as the pencil scratches softly over the paper. Words, like fire, keep the mind alive. When you finally stop, the candle has nearly burned out. The room glows with a faint, warm haze. You fold the paper and tuck it between the pages of your journal, then stretch your legs and lean back. The fire crackled quietly. Sleep comes slowly tonight. You dream again of summer, of walking barefoot through tall grass, of water so clear you can see the sky reflected beneath the surface. The air is warm in your dream, and for a few moments, you forget the weight of the cold world pressing at your door. When you wake, the fire has died down to a soft glow. The cabin feels still, the quiet thick enough to touch. You pull the furs around your shoulders and listen to the faint sigh of wind outside. The dream lingers a moment longer before fading. Tomorrow will be like today. The snow will still fall, the wind will still sing through the trees, and you will still rise to face it. Yet somehow, knowing that spring waits somewhere beyond the horizon feels enough. The thought alone is warmth. Morning creeps into the cabin as a faint grey glow behind the shutters. The wind has quieted, but the air holds a sharp, metallic chill. You sit up slowly, stretch your arms, and listen to the soft creak of the logs adjusting to the cold. The fire from the night before has died completely. A thin layer of frost glimmers on your blanket where your breath froze in the night. You rise, stiff but steady, and coax a spark back to life in the hearth. The warmth comes slowly, climbing through your fingers as the flames catch the dry wood. Soon the small space fills again with the familiar scent of pine smoke. It feels like company. Today will be a quiet day. The traps are set, the wood pile is full, and your food will last another week. For now, survival is not about labor but endurance. You decide to allow yourself a small comfort, a habit that the mountain men guarded like treasure, a drink and a pipe by the fire. You take down the small bottle from the shelf. It is nearly empty now, a finger's width of amber whiskey sloshing at the bottom. The smell is sharp when you open it, and even before you drink, it warms you a little. You take a small sip, feeling the burn trail down your throat and spread through your chest. In the fur traders' journals, many wrote of these small indulgences. Whiskey and tobacco were more than luxuries. They were proof of humanity in a land that demanded the instincts of animals. One veteran trapper wrote that a man without smoke or drink loses his memory of the world beyond the trees. You believe him? You light your pipe carefully with a stick from the fire. The first draw fills your lungs with the sweet, woody taste of old tobacco. The smoke curls upward in lazy rings, drifting toward the roof before disappearing into the vent. You lean back and let the warmth and the haze carry you somewhere between wakefulness and rest. A book once written about the fur trade described how men made rituals out of small comforts, sharpening a knife, pouring the last drops of whiskey, or cleaning a rifle long after it was necessary. These gestures were acts of faith, reminders that the mind could still choose peace even when the world outside offered none. You feel that truth now, sitting in the glow of the fire, your breath mixing with smoke. The silence feels softer today, almost kind. You take another sip, slower this time, and close your eyes. The warmth loosens the tension in your shoulders. You think about the faces of the few men you have shared, drink and stories with the laughter echoing through a trading post, the way tired hands passed a bottle like it was holy. You wonder where they are now, if they too sit somewhere alone in the snow. On the small table beside you rests a pouch of dried tobacco leaves mixed with pine resin. It was a trick learned from an old Shoshone hunter who once traded you jerky for a hatchet. He said the pine resin added strength to the smoke and kept bad spirits away. You smile at the memory. Perhaps it was superstition, but it worked. You smoke until the room grows hazy, then set the pipe aside and add another log to the fire. The light deepens to orange, and the shadows on the walls stretch long and slow. The air hums softly with the crackle of burning sap. Some modern scholars believe that small rituals like these saved more lives than medicine or weapons. The mind, they argued, needs something to hold on to some rhythm that proves life continues. You think of this as you roll the bottle between your palms, feeling its cool glass against your skin. The quiet makes you reflective. You think about what drives a person to live this way, cut off from the world, relying only on instinct and patience. Maybe it was freedom that called you here, or maybe escape. Either way, the mountain has stripped away everything unnecessary. What is left feels simple and pure. Outside, the light has turned pale blue again, the color of another oncoming storm. You step out for air, pulling your coat tight. The snow glows faintly, the surface smooth and unbroken. The smell of the fire clings to you as you breathe in the sharp, clean cold. Somewhere in the distance you hear the low call of a raven. It sounds lonely but content. A sound that belongs here. You walk a short distance to check the ridge, boots crunching softly with each step. The snow rises nearly to your knees. The valley below looks like a frozen ocean, its surface rippling with shadows from the clouds. For a moment, the sight steals your breath. You stay there until your fingers begin to numb, then return to the cabin. The fire is waiting, still alive. You sit again, Add a few sticks and stretch your legs toward the heat. The last of the whiskey is gone now, the bottle empty but still warm from your hands. You set it beside the pipe and lean back against the wall. The cabin hums with quiet life. The hiss of burning wood, the sigh of wind against the roof, the faint crackle of frost creeping down the window pane. You feel the edge of sleep tug at you, but it is a gentle pull, not a fight. Before you close your eyes, you whisper a small thought aloud, barely more than breath. Thank you for another day. The words feel right, even if no one hears them. The fire answers with a soft pop, as if in agreement. You drift towards sleep slowly, your body wrapped in warmth and the faint perfume of smoke. Outside, snow begins to fall again, soft and silent. Inside, the air glows with the comfort of small things, fire, tobacco, memory, and the stubborn will to keep living. The morning begins with silence, the kind that feels too complete to last. You wake to the still air, the faint glow of frost creeping along the walls. The fire has burned itself to ash, and the world outside looks smooth, unbroken, untouched. You rise, wrap your coat tight, and listen for any sign of life. Nothing. Not a bird, not the creak of a branch, only the breath of the mountain. You know that silence too well. It is the warning before a storm. You step outside, and the air feels thick, waiting. The sky hangs low, grey and heavy, pressing down on the ridges. Somewhere far off, a sound rolls across the valley, a deep, drawn-out rumble. It takes you a moment to realize what it is. An avalanche has begun. Your pulse quickens. The sound builds, growing into a steady roar that makes the ground tremble beneath your boots. You cannot see it from here, but you feel its power in your chest. Snow shearing from cliffs, trees snapping like twigs, the mountain shrugging off its own skin. You whisper a quiet word without thinking, a prayer, or perhaps a warning to yourself. Old accounts from surveyors tell of avalanches that travelled faster than horses could run, walls of snow swallowing entire camps in seconds. Some men believed they began with a gunshot or a careless shout. Others said the mountains themselves decided when to shed their burdens. You step back inside, close the door and stand still, waiting for the sound to fade. It passes after a while, the noise rolling away like distant thunder. You breathe again, slow and careful. The cabin feels smaller now, fragile against such power. You stare at the walls you built, knowing how easily nature could erase them. Yet here you still are. You sit by the cold hearth, rubbing your hands together until the feeling returns. Then you rebuild the fire, striking the flint until sparks catch. The smell of smoke rises quickly, grounding you back in the simple act of warmth. As the flames grow, you think about how many men must have vanished under white silence like that, their names never written anywhere. Historians later pieced together clues: abandoned camps, buried tools, but no stories of their last moments. Perhaps that is how mountains prefer it, keeping their secrets sealed under snow. You step outside again after the shaking stops. The air is strangely still, thick with powder hanging in the air like dust after a storm. The sky has cleared a little, the clouds pulling apart to reveal a strip of pale blue. Across the valley, a section of the mountainside gleams smooth and bright where the avalanche fell. You imagine the weight of it, thousands of tons of snow and ice, sliding with the calm certainty of gravity. A journal written by an early naturalist described avalanches as the mountain's breath, an exhalation of everything too heavy to hold. You like that thought. It makes the destruction seem almost gentle, like a sigh instead of an anger. You spend the day gathering what little you can from the slope near the cabin. The snow is deep but packed solid now. Your shovel cuts through it in clean lines. The world smells of wet stone and pine sap. Above, ravens circle where the avalanche fell, already searching for what the snow might have uncovered. Life never waits long to return. By afternoon, the light has turned golden again, soft and thin. You pause to rest, leaning on your shovel, your breath rising in small clouds. The quiet feels heavier now but less menacing. The avalanche has spent its fury. leaving the land cleansed, renewed. You recall hearing an old trapper's story about how he survived being buried alive in an avalanche, digging upward with a knife while his lungs filled with cold. He said afterward that the snow felt alive, pressing and shifting like an ocean. Whether true or not, the image stays with you. You picture it and feel a chill deeper than the weather. Inside the cabin, you hang your coat near the fire and pour melted snow into your tin cup. The water steams faintly, tasting of minerals and wood smoke. You drink slowly, eyes half closed. The sound of the fire is steady now, calm and rhythmic. Researchers who studied early mountain settlements wrote that avalanches taught settlers humility faster than any sermon. The survivors spoke of silence afterward, a silence so complete that it felt sacred. You think of that now, the way the noise of life feels fragile against the vastness of nature. As the light fades, you sit near the door, watching the horizon. The sun dips behind the peaks, painting the snow in gold and rose. The world looks peaceful again, as if nothing violent ever happened. Yet you know that beneath that beauty, danger never sleeps. It waits, patient as the cold. You add one more log to the fire and let your mind drift. The memory of the avalanche lingers in your chest, heavy but strangely beautiful. You think of it as a reminder, a lesson whispered by the mountain itself. You are small, but you are still here. The night settles in quietly, bringing back the calm. The fire glows against the walls, the wood crackling in gentle rhythm. You pull the furs around your shoulders and close your eyes. Outside, the snow lies still again, the silence deep and forgiving. The blizzard begins without warning. One moment, the air is still and dry. The next, it is filled with spinning white. Snowflakes whip past the window so fast they blur into a solid sheet, erasing the world beyond your door. The wind moans through the trees, low and endless, like a great animal pacing outside. You brace the shutters and stuff fur into the cracks along the walls. The cabin groans, each gust pressing against it with heavy force. The sound fills every space, making conversation with yourself impossible. You move quickly, checking supplies, tightening ropes, securing the roof poles with fresh knots. Trappers' reports from the early 1800s describe these storms as living things. One man wrote that a blizzard could feel like a herd of ghosts pushing against the sky. Reading those words once made you smile. Now they feel less poetic and more like truth. By nightfall, the world beyond the window has disappeared completely. There is no horizon, no sky, no ground, only motion. The snow roars past the cabin in relentless waves. The wind rattles the door latch as if testing your resolve. You sit near the fire, listening to it all, wrapped in your thickest coat. You remind yourself of the rules. Do not open the door once it seals with ice. Do not sleep too long at once. Keep the fire alive. You follow these commandments as though they were ancient scripture. The rhythm of survival keeps you anchored when reason begins to drift. You feed the flames one log at a time. Sparks leap upward, small and defiant against the dark. The smoke curls through the chimney, carried off by the storm's breath. Every few minutes you stand to check the walls, feeling for drafts, tightening the fur around the window seams. Inside the noise, time begins to dissolve. Minutes feel like hours, hours like days. You lose count of how long the wind has screamed. You measure its fury by how much wood remains in the pile. Each log burned is a small piece of safety turned to ash. An account from a fort west of here told of men trapped inside their cabins for 10 days without light. They melted snow over candle stubs for water and used rifle stocks for firewood by the end. You think about that story often, not with fear, but with respect. The line between survival and surrender is thinner than a breath. Your eyes grow heavy, but the sound keeps you awake. It fills your ears, presses into your chest, shakes dust from the rafters. At one point, the cabin shudders so violently you instinctively grab your rifle, though no weapon can fight a storm. You whisper into the noise, not expecting an answer. Hold together. You murmur to the walls, to the fire, to yourself. The words vanish instantly, swallowed by the howl. By the second day, fatigue sets in. The constant sound grinds at your nerves, turns thought to fog. You start to imagine voices inside the wind, familiar, gentle, impossible. You hear your name once, or think you do, carried faintly through the storm. You pause, listening, half believing, but there is only wind. A scientist who later studied the journals of early settlers noted that prolonged storms could alter perception. Men claimed to see figures moving outside or lights dancing above the drifts. The mind, stripped of sight and silence, invents its own company. You wonder if that is what is happening to you now. The blizzard's fury continues for what feels like forever. You ration the firewood carefully, breaking larger logs in half to stretch the supply. The air inside the cabin grows thick with smoke, but you do not dare open the vent wider. The outside air would snuff the flame in seconds. When the storm finally begins to weaken, it happens gradually. The roar softens to a deep hum, then a whisper. You wait another few hours before lifting the latch. The door creaks, frozen at the edges. You push hard, and a wave of snow spills inside, glittering in the weak light. The air outside is painfully bright. The world has changed completely. Drifts rise higher than your shoulders, smooth as carved stone. Trees lie half buried, their branches heavy with frost. The silence that follows the storm is thick, almost holy. You step out slowly, feeling the crunch of snow beneath your boots. The cold stings your face, but it feels like freedom. Historical accounts describe this same moment with reverence. After every great blizzard, there came a hush that no man could explain, a stillness so deep that even breath felt loud. You experience it now. The world holds its breath with you. You turn in a slow circle, taking it all in. Your cabin, half buried, looks like a mound of snow with smoke curling from its top. The valley stretches before you, transformed into a landscape of sculpted white. The sunlight reflects so fiercely that tears prick your eyes. You squint and laugh, the sound startling in the silence. You survived again, not through strength perhaps, but through persistence. That is the only kind of victory the mountains respect. You return to the cabin, brush snow from your shoulders, and sit once more beside the fire. The warmth feels deeper now, earned. The storm has taken much of your energy, but it has also left behind a calm that feels pure. As dusk falls, you watch the last light fade over the ridges. The snow outside glows blue, and the sky turns to velvet. You close your eyes for a moment, hearing only the soft crackle of fire and the faint sigh of settling snow. For the first time in days, there is no wind, no noise, no fear. In this fragile peace, you realize that silence is not always empty. Sometimes, it is the mountain's way of saying, "You may stay another night." The air after the blizzard feels hollow and clean. Each breath tastes of ice and pine. You step outside at dawn, boots sinking into a surface so smooth it feels wrong to disturb it. The sun peeks weakly over the eastern ridge, a pale disk behind drifting mist. For a moment you simply stand there, feeling the stillness of a world washed blank. Your cabin survived, though the roof leans a little, burdened with snow. You brush it off with a shovel, hearing the soft thud of each pile hitting the ground. The sound feels almost gentle after so much noise. You work slowly, careful not to slip. The cold stings your fingertips through your gloves. Inside, the fire burns low, whispering rather than crackling. You add a log, then sit back on your heels, taking stock of what remains. Supplies are thinning again. A few days of wood, some dried meat, a little salt. The storm ate time as easily as it did daylight. You begin to mend what the wind has broken. One shutter hangs loose, the hinge twisted. You straighten it with your knife and a small stone, tapping until it fits again. The rhythm of the sound is satisfying. Each fix feels like reclaiming a little order from chaos. Letters written by early mountaineers often spoke of this instinct, the compulsion to repair everything after disaster. One wrote that the smallest task gave the illusion of control, a thread of sanity stitched into the cloth of despair. You understand that now. It is not the storm itself that tests a person, but what comes after. You move through the cabin, inspecting each tool, each piece of gear. Your boots are cracked near the sole. You warm a strip of hide over the fire, soften it, and patch the tear with careful stitches. The thread creaks as it pulls tight. You hold the boot near the flame until the wax in the seams melts, sealing the gap. It feels sturdy again, and you allow yourself a small nod of approval. Next, you turn to the axe. Its handle has split slightly near the head. You carve a thin wedge from pine, slide it into the crack, and hammer it gently until the metal bites deep again. The smell of resin fills the room, sharp and sweet. The sound of wood meeting steel echoes softly, a rhythm that feels almost musical. A collection of explorer journals once described this constant cycle of breaking and mending as the pulse of mountain life. Everything falls apart, then is rebuilt. The beauty lies in the persistence, not the perfection. You think about that as you polish the blade with a strip of cloth, watching your reflection flicker in the metal. By midday, the sun climbs higher, though its warmth never truly reaches you. You step outside again, carrying a bundle of wet furs to hang near the smoke. The air smells fresh, the kind of freshness that only follows a storm. You hear a distant crack somewhere across the valley, the sound of ice breaking loose from a high ledge. The echo rolls long and low before fading back into stillness. You take a moment to breathe, closing your eyes. The wind is gone. In its place is something quieter, almost tender. For the first time in weeks, you sense the faintest hint of thaw. Tiny droplets of water slide from the edge of your roof, one by one, tapping against the snow below. A frontier record from a survey team mentioned how even a single drop of melting snow could lift a man's spirit after months of cold. It meant movement, life, the promise of change. You watch the drops fall, hypnotized by their rhythm. Back inside, you set to work repairing your coat. The seams near the shoulders have frayed from constant wear. You thread your needle with sinew, the motion steady, your hands remembering what to do without thought. The repetition is comforting. Outside, the light softens into gold. The world feels almost gentle again. Later, you sharpen your knife, the steel ringing quietly with each stroke. You oil the blade, wipe it clean, and set it down beside your traps, all neatly arranged. There is satisfaction in seeing them lined up, ready again, waiting for purpose. An anthropologist once wrote that mountain men were artisans disguised as wanderers. Their survival depended not on brute strength, but on the artistry of mending, building, and adapting. You smile at the idea. Out here, craft is prayer. Every repair is a small offering to endurance itself. As night approaches, you cook what remains of the smoked meat, mixing it with a handful of ground corn and melted snow. The smell fills the room, earthy and familiar. You eat slowly, savoring each bite, feeling warmth spread through your chest. The wind returns for a brief moment, brushing against the cabin like a sigh. It feels almost affectionate now, as if the mountain approves of your stubbornness. You chuckle softly, shaking your head. The fire burns bright again, light flickering across the repaired tools and patched clothing. You sit back, feeling the ache of the day settle into your bones, a good kind of tired. Outside, the sky turns indigo, and the first stars appear above the black line of the ridge. You take a deep breath, feeling the scent of smoke and pine fill your lungs. The cabin creaks, settling with the temperature drop. Everything feels steady again, at least for now. Before sleep, you whisper quietly to the darkness, a promise to yourself. You will keep fixing, keep patching, keep mending, no matter what else the mountain takes. The fire answers with a soft pop, and the cabin glows with a steady, living warmth. The snow outside has hardened into a crust, and the air has turned so clear that sound carries for miles. When you wake, The light has already begun to slip through the shutters, thin and silver. You sit up slowly, rubbing your hands together for warmth, and listen to the steady hush that fills the cabin. It is the kind of silence that follows long hardship, the quiet that feels both strange and precious. Today, you do not plan to hunt or mend or chop wood. Today is for words. The thought has been circling your mind for days, a small voice whispering that it is time to write again. There is a restlessness in you that no fire can ease. You take out your journal and lay it open on the table, its pages rough and yellowed from smoke. The pencil you use is short and dull, worn down to the length of your finger. Still, it works. You begin slowly, uncertain of what to say. At first, you write about the cold, the hunger, the strange rhythm of the days. Then, without meaning to, you begin to write to someone. Not anyone in particular, just a presence that feels real when the loneliness grows too large. You tell them about the sound of dripping snow, about how the mountain smells after a storm, about the way the stars seem closer here, bright enough to burn through cloud. Travelers of the old frontier often kept letters they never sent. Some were addressed to wives who had moved on, others to children who would never know these lands. Archaeologists later found those scraps tucked into cracks of cabins, preserved by time and frost. They called them ghost letters. You think about that as your pencil moves. Maybe yours will become one too. The words come faster now. You write about the wolves, about the river that nearly broke beneath you, about the fever that stole 2 nights of memory. You admit your fears to the page, the ones you never speak aloud. You confess how sometimes, when the wind rises, you feel it calling your name. Writing it down feels like exhaling a weight you did not know you carried. Outside, the sun has climbed higher. The snow on the roof begins to melt, dripping in steady rhythm onto the ground below. Each drop marks time more clearly than any clock could. You pause, listening to it, then return to your writing. You draw a line across the page and begin another letter, this one to no one at all. To whoever finds this, you write, know that winter does not hate you. It tests you until you learn to love what is small. A spark, a bowl of soup, the sound of your own heartbeat. You stare at the words for a long moment before adding, that is enough. You smile faintly. The smile surprises you. For the first time in months, the thought of spring feels close enough to touch. A historian once wrote that isolation can turn a man into a philosopher faster than any library. Out here, you have no audience, no argument, only reflection. The mountains strip you of everything unnecessary until only thought remains. You find a strange comfort in that truth. As the day passes, you continue to write. You sketch the layout of your cabin, the trail you follow to the traps, the bend in the river where the ice groans each morning. You mark the spot where you saw the wolves, and another where the avalanche fell. It feels like building a map of your own endurance. The light shifts toward afternoon. You step outside to stretch, your breath rising in faint clouds. The valley glows gold beneath the setting sun, the snow glittering like dust. A thin breeze stirs the pines, carrying the faint scent of sap and smoke. You stand there for a long while, notebook in hand, staring at the view that has become your whole world. An explorer's diary from nearly a century ago described this same feeling, the deep connection between solitude and gratitude. When the heart grows quiet, he wrote, even suffering begins to feel sacred. You understand him now. Back inside, you place the finished pages beneath a stone on the shelf, safe from the drafts. The act feels ceremonial, a promise to the future that you were here and that you endured. You imagine someone finding these pages one day, reading your handwriting, and knowing that for a time you were part of this wild silence. The night comes early again, though now it feels gentler. You eat a small meal, light your pipe, and let the smoke drift lazily toward the ceiling. The glow from the fire makes the walls look soft and golden. Before lying down, you look at your journal one last time. You whisper a few words into the quiet, just to feel your voice again. Stay warm. You tell the empty room, unsure whether you mean yourself or whoever might someday listen. The fire hums softly, the only living sound left. Outside, the stars return, scattered across the sky like silver dust. Inside, your letters rest quietly on the table, a record of both struggle and grace. You close your eyes, comforted by the thought that words will keep you company long after your voice is gone. The first sign of spring comes quietly. It is not warmth, not yet, but a sound, the faint drip of water from the eaves, steady and rhythmic like the ticking of a distant clock. You wake to it, blinking in the dim morning light, unsure at first if it is real. Then you hear another drop, then another. Each one lands softly in the snow outside, a small reminder that change has begun. You step out of your bedroll, stretch and open the door. The air smells different today. It carries a touch of moisture, a breath of earth buried under months of frost. The cold still bites, but there is softness in it now. The sky, once hard and grey, glows pale blue above the ridges. You stand there for a while, letting the weak sunlight touch your face. It feels strange after so many weeks of endless winter. The snow around the cabin sparkles, its surface broken by the tiny rivulets of meltwater running in crooked lines. You follow one with your eyes until it disappears into the woods. Old journals from fur traders described this moment with reverence. One called it the whisper before the thaw. Another wrote that the sound of dripping water could move a man to tears after months of silence. You understand both sentiments. The sound feels alive, fragile, and holy all at once. You gather your gear and head toward the ridge to check the river. The snow is still deep, but now it shifts underfoot, softening with every step. The crust that once held your weight gives way in patches, and your boots sink down through layers of slush. You move slower, careful not to fall. The air hums faintly with the distant rush of water beneath the ice. When you reach the riverbank, the sight takes your breath. The frozen surface has cracked open in places, revealing streaks of black water sliding beneath the ice. Steam rises faintly where sunlight touches it. You crouch, listening to the steady gurgle of water finding its voice again. The sound feels like the earth exhaling after a long sleep. One explorer's letter from the 1830 mentioned that the thaw was both a blessing and a danger. The snowmelt could turn valleys into rivers overnight, sweeping away camps, bridges, and everything men had built. Yet every mountain man waited for it with the patience of a pilgrim. It meant food, travel, and life returning. You fill your canteen with fresh meltwater and take a long drink. It is shockingly cold, but clean and bright. It tastes of stone and sky. As you wipe your mouth, you notice the first signs of color near the bank, a patch of dark moss, a tiny sprig of green pushing through the thawing mud. It looks impossibly delicate, yet certain. You smile without meaning to. Months of white, and now this single green thread feels like proof that the world still remembers how to begin again. The walk back to your cabin feels lighter. The snow crunches less with each step, and the air warms enough that you loosen your collar. When you reach the clearing, you pause to look at the roof, glistening wet under the weak sun. Drops fall steadily from its edge, tapping the earth like rain. Inside, the air smells faintly of damp wood. You add a small log to the fire, though you no longer need it as much. The warmth feels symbolic now, more comfort than necessity. You sit by the hearth, drying your gloves, listening to the distant sound of dripping outside. Records from early trading forts tell that spring always arrived unevenly. Some mornings felt like mercy, others like mockery. A single cold wind could undo days of thaw. You decide not to trust the weather fully yet, but hope is a habit hard to resist. As afternoon stretches on, you walk out to your traps, not to hunt but to check for damage. The snow there has begun to sag and separate. You find one trap rusted, another half buried in slush. You clean them carefully, rubbing oil into the metal with a scrap of cloth. Even that small act feels like preparation for life returning. When you finish, you climb a short rise and look out over the valley. Thin threads of smoke rise from somewhere far away, another trapper, maybe a small camp thawing out after the same long sleep. The sight fills you with a quiet ache of connection. You raise your hand in a gesture no one will see. Evening arrives with a golden hue you have not seen in months. The light spills through the trees, turning the snow to silver and the air to honey. You sit outside the cabin, back against the wall, watching the horizon glow. The air hums softly with melting snow and the faint rush of distant water. Scholars who studied these early mountain lives often wrote that spring marked not just survival but transformation. Winter stripped away everything, leaving only endurance. Spring returned color to the soul. You feel that truth now, deep and sure. You close your eyes and let the sounds wash over you, the dripping water, the soft wind, the crack of ice surrendering to warmth. You think of all the months behind you, of the storms, the sickness, the fire that never failed you. You realize you have become something quieter, steadier. As darkness falls, you go inside, your heart lighter than it has been in a long time. The fire burns low, gentle and steady. You write one short line in your journal before sleep takes you. The mountain breathes again, and so do I. Outside, the thaw continues, slow and certain, a rhythm older than memory. Inside, you rest with the same peace, knowing you have lived to see the world begin again. The air has changed again. The snow still lies heavy in the shadows, but the valleys hum with the faint rush of meltwater. When you step outside this morning, the air smells wet and wild, like stone that has just remembered rain. The sunlight spills gently across the clearing, soft enough that you close your eyes to feel it. You stand quietly for a moment, listening. The world is no longer silent. The river murmurs in the distance. Small birds call from the pines, and the snow drips steadily from every branch. It feels like a conversation you have been waiting months to hear again. You walk down toward the stream, rifle across your shoulder, more out of habit than need. The snow gives way beneath your boots, slushy and uneven. In some places, the ground is already visible, slick with mud and dotted with bits of moss. The sun catches the wet earth, releasing a scent that makes you dizzy with recognition. Records kept by the old fur companies often noted this part of spring as the most dangerous and the most beautiful. The thaw freed everything trapped by ice, the rivers, the soil, even the secrets the snow had kept buried. You think about that as you move along the edge of the water. At first you see nothing unusual. Then, near the bend, something dark catches your eye. You step closer, careful of the soft ground. Half buried in slush lies a torn piece of fabric. Old and faded. You kneel, brushing it free, and realize it is part of a coat, stiff with frost. Beneath it, you glimpse the curve of a bone. You stay still for a long time, staring. It could be an animal, but the shape is wrong. You know what you are looking at. Someone who did not make it through the winter has returned to the surface. The journals of explorers speak often of such discoveries. They wrote that the mountains take lives without cruelty or malice, simply through indifference. The thaw always reveals those who lost the bargain. You bow your head for a moment, not out of fear but respect. You cover the remains again with a blanket of pine branches. Then you take a strip of bark and carve a small cross into it with your knife. You press it into the ground nearby, not as a monument but as acknowledgement. Out here, remembrance is the only kind of burial most receive. As you stand, the sound of rushing water grows louder. The river has begun to break open fully, the ice cracking and folding over itself in deep, thunderous tones. You step back quickly as a slab splits apart near the bank, the current pulling it downstream. The sight is both terrifying and beautiful, the power of nature waking from sleep. A geographer's note once described the Rocky Mountain thaw as a season of ghosts and rivers. You think of that now, the way everything buried returns to motion, the way sound fills every space again. The mountains are breathing, and you are breathing with them. You sit for a while near the riverbank, letting the cool spray touch your face. The wind carries the scent of wet pine and melting snow. You notice small things you had forgotten to miss. The buzz of insects near the mud, the faint glint of sunlight on running water, the ripple of birdsong above the trees. Each sound feels like a promise. When you return to the cabin, the snow around it has already begun to sink, pulling away from the walls. The door no longer sticks when you open it. Inside, the air feels lighter. You hang your wet coat by the fire and sit down with your journal. You write about the thaw, about the body you found, about the noise of the river splitting itself apart. You do not dwell on sadness. You write instead about endurance, about how even the dead return to the circle of life here. The mountains keep nothing forever. Historians who later studied these lands called this the time of legends. Each melted valley carried stories, some true, some imagined, of the men who vanished, the ones who were too stubborn or too brave. You realize that those stories are less about death than about belonging. Everyone who enters this wilderness becomes part of it eventually, one way or another. Outside, the afternoon light shifts, golden and thin. The last icicles drop from the roof, shattering softly against the mud. You watch them fall, feeling both sorrow and peace. As the evening settles, you build a small fire by the riverbank. You sit there until the stars appear, reflecting in the black water. The sound of the current is steady, patient, eternal. You whisper a few words into the dark, a farewell for whoever lies beneath the snow and for every name that time will forget. The flames flicker low, and you close your eyes. The air carries both cold and warmth now, as if the world is balancing between two breaths. The mountain does not mourn, it renews. You feel that rhythm inside your chest, slow and deep, and you know you are part of it. When you finally stand to return home, the moon is rising behind the peaks, silver light touching the river. The water moves steadily onward, carrying pieces of ice and memory toward the plains below. You watch it for a moment longer, then turn toward the faint glow of your cabin window, ready to rest. The nights grow shorter now, though they are still cold. When you wake, the sky already carries a faint warmth, a streak of pink stretching above the peaks. You step outside and stand for a while in the doorway, watching the light creep over the snow. The world no longer feels like a cage of ice. It feels like something exhaling, slow and forgiving. The ground near the cabin is wet and soft, dotted with patches of dark soil. You kneel and press your hand to it. It is cold, but alive. You can feel the pulse of water beneath, running toward the river. You smile, a small, quiet thing. You survived. You begin to move through the morning with a sense of calm. The tasks are simple now. Checking what remains, packing what can travel, mending the few things that still matter. The traps will soon be stored for another season. The cabin will wait in silence until next year. Letters left by early trappers often spoke of this part of the year with both relief and sadness. They wrote that when the snow melted and the passes opened, the mountains felt emptier somehow. The struggle had been the company, the challenge, the only conversation. You understand that truth now. You walk down to the river one last time. The ice is gone, replaced by dark, swift water flashing under the morning sun. Birds flutter in the trees, and you hear the distant echo of a woodpecker somewhere on the far ridge. The sound is rhythmic, steady, like the earth's own heartbeat returning. You crouch at the edge of the river and watch the current sweep away pieces of broken ice. Each fragment spins and catches the light, vanishing downstream. The water smells clean, like new beginnings. You dip your hands into it, and the cold stings your skin, but you keep them there a moment longer. It feels like a baptism in endurance. One explorer wrote that leaving the mountains each spring was harder than surviving their winters. They had become home, in a way only hardship can make a place feel sacred. You think about that as you stand, the wind tugging gently at your coat. You look up at the peaks, now gleaming white against the wide sky. You will miss this silence, this measure of your own strength. Back at the cabin, you sit for a long time by the fire. The flames are smaller now, burning just enough to warm your hands. The walls around you are stained with smoke and lined with memories. Every mark tells a story: the notch on the door where the frost cracked the wood, the blackened stone where the soup once boiled too long, the faint scratch of your knife in the table's surface. Each one is proof that you were here, that you lived and endured. You take out your journal and write one final entry. The mountain has given me nothing easily. It has taken my comfort, my voice, my sleep, and in return it has given me a kind of peace I did not know existed. You close the book and rest your hand on it. The leather feels warm from your touch. Outside, the wind shifts, carrying the smell of pine and damp soil. You step into the clearing, the snow now broken into uneven patches. The trees sway gently, and somewhere far off, you hear the faint call of an elk. The world is waking, and you are part of its rhythm. A naturalist once said that survival changes a man's shape from the inside. It pares him down until only what is essential remains. You feel that truth in your bones. The mountain has carved you quietly, not with cruelty but with patience. You are lighter now, clearer, as if the cold itself has burned away all that was unnecessary. You look up at the sky once more, feeling the sun on your face. It is not warm yet, but it will be. The light spreads across the valley, touching every drift, every shadow, every scar of winter. It feels like forgiveness. You whisper into the air, a simple goodbye. The sound fades into the trees, caught by the wind, carried toward the distant plains. The mountain does not answer, but it listens. You can feel it. That night, you sleep deeply for the first time in months. The air that drifts through the cracks is cool but not cruel. The fire burns down to embers, steady and slow. Your breathing matches the rhythm of the world outside, calm and even. The next morning, you will leave this place, though part of you will remain in the quiet woods and frozen rivers. The mountain will keep your footprints for a little while, then let the new grass grow over them. The thaw continues. The streams gather strength, the rivers open their mouths, and the snow shrinks quietly into the soil. The world softens, and so do you. The long fight against the cold has ended, leaving behind a stillness that feels like gratitude. You picture the cabin now from above, small against the wide valley, smoke curling gently from its chimney. The mountains stand watch around it, old and endless, their peaks still capped in silver. The air hums faintly with life-returning water, wind, and the slow unfurling of green. You let your mind drift with the river, carried downstream